Will the soundtrack kindly produce a sound? Go on. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Any sound. Well, that isn't quite what I had in mind.
In the long run, it loses power going that far under a small current.
Wow, I didn't know
so
that.
That's why I beefed up all the cords on our carts to 12s or 10. So when I do plug them in, I'm getting as close to the currency as I can get. Which helps all your motors and everything don't strain. The pumps and the heating elements don't strain to try and keep your water at 200 degrees.
Well, I guess that's what you learn after 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the
you
thing.
learn it pretty quick. You're like, why is the machine not giving great shots? The water's not hot enough, and the pump's not, just doesn't have the power.
Well, speaking of 30 years, can you kind of walk us back and, like you were telling me when we first met, how did you guys get started in this? How did you bring?
Are we hot? We're ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
You're rolling. I love it. I'm trying to get this thing shut down here so we're not getting the ring on. So I worked for a utility company for 14 years, get out of high school, moved to New Orleans and worked in the restaurant business. My brother got me a job working at Brennan. So really we got into the restaurant or the hospitality industry a little bit earlier. I didn't realize that was going to be a major
catalyst for
this going
for what
forward.
You do now, yeah.
And
sorry.
And so after 14 years of being in the corporate business, the majority of the members in my family are all entrepreneurs. One's a doctor, one's a nurse, the other one's has his own fiber optics company, and the other one's in the restaurant business. My dad was in sales, all his life. So I was like, went straight into corporate and did that for 14 years, but I had this burning desire to do something. So, over that period of time, I was selling Halon fire extinguishers. At one point, I was doing runless pantyhose with my mom.
No way.
That was fun. You
can sell those. You can probably sell anything.
Back in the 80s, that was the thing, right?
Oh, okay.
Because I worked in corporate too, and I was like, pantyhose that I don't have to put, that don't run, and you don't have to put fingernail polish on to keep it from running. It was like we had to wear those in Houston downtown. You had to wear pantyhose and
selling those multi-level. That was the thing to do.
That was a thing. Okay. That was a big thing.
You couldn't buy those in the store at the time.
Wow,
they had legs.
What a different time.
That's a whole nother
podcast. But just going forward from there, my one of my older brothers, he was living in California doing fiber optics in these high rises downtown LA, and he sends me a picture and he says, I saw this coffee cart. This is way in the early 90s. He said, I saw this coffee cart and they're selling coffees for $4 a cup of coffee. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I said, they're not doing anything like that in Austin yet. So I did a little bit of research, and he was sending me stuff. People in California that started getting in the coffee industry. And at that time, there was only a handful of coffee bars in Austin at that point. And so I started doing research on the coffee end of it. And my corporate came up and said that we're going to be doing a layoff next 6 months out down the road. And I was like, oh man, maybe this is an opportunity for me to, jump ship here and take this coffee thing seriously. Dang. And then so I had cold feet at the beginning, and this is when my older brother said, hey, if you don't try something, if you don't do this now, you may regret this later on in life. You do it while you're young, So anyway.
So what age were you at this time?
I was afraid you were going to ask.
Are you I'm thinking
I was about
30s.
33, 34 when I started this company.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's been a ride, but still young.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm 34 still.
You look like you're 34 still. You guys both look really young.
It's all in the coffee.
Yeah, I guess so.
Magic beans.
So yeah, I did about a year's
I gotta
worth
start
of
drinking this
research.
stuff now.
Yeah, right.
Get your coffee in now.
But I did about a year's worth of 6 months to a year's worth of research on it before I jumped ship, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Contacted a company that sells espresso equipment, Italian equipment out of Houston, and they help people get coffee bars started. And so I
Wow.
called
That
them.
was his dream, the coffee bar.
Yeah, it was actually going to go to a coffee bar. That's what I wanted to open.
Yeah.
And contacted them, and we had a couple meetings, and they're like, how much money it was going to take.
Mhm.
You know, it was close to $80,000 to get a coffee bar going at that point.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's a big step when this is new to the market here. So I was like, I said, let me think about it. So thought about it for a week or so. Well, they called me back out of Houston and said, listen, why don't you come over to Houston, spend a week or so with us. We're going to teach you everything about espresso, grinders, burrs, everything you need to know. And then we'll do sales for us in Central Texas. So I thought, what a
Okay.
great idea. So that way I could get my education on coffee.
That is a great idea.
Because-
That's an awesome
Because
idea.
I didn't know anything about coffee. In the corporate setting, it was whenever you could smell that burned coffee in the back, that was like everybody looked and go, who's making the next pot?
Yeah.
So it was like just Folgers and just regular drip.
Mhm.
So I didn't drink a lot of coffee at that time. So fast forward, they took me under their wing, and I spent a week or two in Houston, and just learning everything about espresso, the Italian espresso machines, the Italian way of making espresso, and perfecting that.
Yeah.
And then I hit the streets and went out to San Antonio, Austin, Central Texas, calling on mom and pops trying to sell espresso equipment.
Wow.
And after a period of about a year, had a little success doing that, but a lot of the people wanted to lease or rent the equipment because they really thought this was going to be a fad, not a trend. And so I was like, okay, so people are wanting to rent or lease. So I was sitting in a restaurant bar on 6th Street one afternoon while I was out making calls.
Yeah.
On a napkin, I just drew a little cart out, and I said, you know what? I'm going to build a cart. I'll put a machine on it, and then I'll rent it out, and
But
I
I'm gonna
go with it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how I started this whole thing. So
Wow.
built the cart, and my first event was in August up in Leander at a grape stomp at a vineyard. They were doing a grand opening grape stomp up in Leander.
Wow.
And I was so excited because I had my cart built. I had a big umbrella on it with a jet spray with liquid cold coffee in it.
Yeah.
And here I was sweating my tail off, and everybody's walking up looking at me going, are you crazy? It's 104 degrees and you're selling hot coffee, cappuccinos, and, this iced coffee. I made 50 or 60 bucks that day. I was so excited. That was my first gig.
Wow. That's so cool. I bet that was a rush.
It was for me, because at that point I was unemployed and started my business.
Yeah.
And here I was, on my way.
Wow.
But during that event, I ran into a property manager, and she had a or one of the high rises on Congress Avenue. And she goes, this might be great in our lobby, something like this. So lo and behold, I took my cart down there and went down one day a week, and we worked the cart, did it for one day a week, then the next day, two days a week, and then 3 days a week, and then started teaching people about the espresso and cappuccinos and really educating the public and educating all the people in that building. So I really got to know all the people in the building. And so I did that moved in a big cart at that point, and a larger cart, which was self-sustained. So it had the refrigerator and things on it.
Oh, dang.
So I was growing at that point.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years. And after a couple of years or about a year and a half, one of the major tenants in the building moved out.
Oh, okay.
And so I lost like majority of my audience that I had just educated. And so my income dwindled. I go, okay, now what am I going to do? So at this point, we were looking at hospitals to move these kiosks into the hospital lobbies. And so went and talked to the hospitals and got into the hospital. Seton Northwest was my first location. and then Brackenridge, and then Children's Hospital, and then I purchased St. David. So I had 4 kiosks within that next year in
Wow.
going on.
How, do you just staffing them? You just learn to train
First,
people?
I was running them, and then I had to staff them. So then there
what was that? What was that jump like from? Oh gosh, I can't be Johnny Beans everywhere. I have to now train these people.
Yeah, that was the hard part, was running an ad trying to find a barista.
Nobody knew what a
where
barista
nobody knew what a barista was.
Oh my God.
Back in the
That
90s.
is so
Back in the
crazy.
90s, they're
it
like,
was
huh?
the Green Sheet and the American Statesman. So I'd run an ad looking for a bartender of coffee. I was like trying to explain, what a barista was.
So when was, I guess just really quick, like when was the shift, I guess, right? Where coffee became such a big, like,
Probably late
That's funny.
90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, late 90s.
late 90s?
Yeah, when it really started to pick up and people started opening a few more coffee bars in town.
Okay. So at this point then, were you still wanting to open up a coffee bar? Or like when did the shift happen between like the catering?
Well, it's funny because when I met you, so John and I got together in like year 2000, right? So when I met John, he was actually had a pizza restaurant.
What?
Yeah, he had a pizza restaurant that was in the morning a coffee bar, and then at night pizza. And
Oh, okay.
so it was all Italian. So he had a pizza restaurant. He had the kiosk at the hospitals. And he had a
I was repping for a soft serve
ice cream company,
Which was
and he was doing high end catering, because the catering part of this, us going out and doing espresso catering, was a small portion of the business, because it was very high end. Like you had a tuxedo shirt on, you had a the Dells were hiring us, the governor, it was nobody else knew what that was or even understood the service, right? So when I met John and he was doing all these things, the catering was just one more thing that wasn't the biggest part of the business at all. And so I kind of sat down with him and I said, I was working at the time as an executive assistant to a executive marketing guy at IBM, right? And so that had 20 years of being an executive assistant. So I kind of sat down with him and said, let me look at your books. Let me see what's working, what's not working. Let me just kind of check out what's going on from an accounting standpoint, right? What's working?
Yeah.
And so I looked at all of those things and it was like, oh, okay, retail, restaurant, kiosks, money in, money out, that's what it was. And then how many employees do you have to keep up with? And if they don't show up, what happens? And so there's a lot of work to do the retail. And I was like, what about?
That was not my strong point. My strong side was the front end, the barista,
John was,
the people, the hospitality, serving the customers. I love.
Oh, you mean the business side?
Yeah, the business side of it. It takes a lot to run a business. You have to. You have to wear a lot of hats.
I have money today. I don't have money.
We need to go do a coffee bar.
So we all sat down and we were like, okay, let's just figure out what is really working here, right? And so even at the time that he was doing the coffee bars, because that was the initial, goal, it was still retail. It was still selling coffee 1 cup at a time to customers. But when I started to focus a little bit more on the aspect, because I was in corporate, I came from corporate. I'm like, why aren't you doing this in a corporate setting? There were meetings every day. They were bringing in lunches. They were bringing in, So I was like, why aren't we doing this in corporate setting? Wow. And so we started to kind of look at the catering as a business-to-business service, right? This is a service we're providing to the property managers, right? You want us to come serve your tenants? Don't charge them. Don't make them pay for it, right? You hire me to come make your tenants happy. So that's kind of how the catering thing evolved. And it's funny when we talk about when did coffee get so popular.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because we've watched it over 30 years evolve to what it is, and we've had to pivot each time to kind of figure out. Now we stayed in our lane because we're not going for the
Coffee
fad.
bar,
We're not going
coffee
for the
bar.
whatever's happening. We're very traditional in the way that we prepare the coffee and serve the coffee, and but yeah, watching it kind of grow where before, back in the early 90s, late 90s, people would come up and say, I'll have a cappuccino. And John would say, well, what's the difference between a cappuccino and a latte? And they're like, I have no idea.
It's like, they see it on TV, they heard it.
They've heard it. Starbucks was getting big, at that point. So everybody was like, I'll have a macchiato, right? And they had no idea what that was from a true, meaning of the word. They just knew it from the marketing, standpoint of what coffee bars were serving, right? So we did a lot of educating and a lot of, it was a long time before people came up to our bar and didn't need to be educated about what we were doing.
Wow.
It was very interesting how we kind of evolved from that.
Well, it's cool that y'all did that you guys did educate people because I don't know. Like when I go to Starbucks, I get a caramel macchiato or a latte. It's like, I'm just going to drink.
Right.
It's what the guy in front of me got.
Right. What he's having.
It's what I see on the menu.
What he's having.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So that was really, and so then we started very small in the catering space because people still didn't understand what this was, right? They're like, what do you mean you come out and you have a coffee bar? Like, I don't understand what that means. And so we started promoting our business in a breakfast club, like a breakfast meeting, networking group.
Yeah.
And so we'd go to the
just
group
to meet people and get the word out there, what we're doing.
We'd go to a group and they go, give your 30-second spiel, and we give our little 30-second spiel and they'd still look at us like, what are you talking about? So I was like, okay, let's bring the coffee bar in and let's set it up and serve them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we just started doing. We're like, let me just serve you and show you what we're talking about. And it started to kind of catch on, sold off all of the other businesses.
Yeah,
and
we did the coffee bars at the hospitals for about 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And then sold those and strictly went into the catering.
Just went into catering.
But going back to the coffee, the kiosks, I'd been in business for about 3 years, still trying to hire baristas, but I wanted to see what other baristas were doing around the country. Because I was like, nobody, there wasn't that many coffee bars here in town. And so I was like, there was a barista competition advertised in a national magazine. So I said, I'm going to get into this competition just to see what other baristas are doing around the country. It was a Fresh Cup magazine, and they did they did 4 competitions around the United States. And then those 4 people competed for the Barista World Series competition in Portland later that year. So I went through the application process and went up to the Dallas Food Show for the competition, and I competed against maybe 5 or 6 other baristas. I took my own espresso blend up there, just wanted to just rub elbows with the baristas, and see what's going on in this coffee world, this crazy coffee world of what's going on. Ended up winning that competition, and I was like, oh my gosh,
wow,
what have I done now?
Yeah, you have something now.
Yeah, I've got myself into something here now.
So that won you the spot.
So that won me the spot to go to the Barista World Series competition, and that was in 97, in October of 97, I believe it was. And went up there and ended up winning the Barista World Series competition in 97 in Portland. Crazy. So that's what I knew. I really had something going on in my direction of.
Yeah, I would say so. That's crazy. So can you talk about a little bit of what it was like for you guys? You got married, right? And then now you kind of brushed over that decision to niche down, but that's scary.
Well, what was really scary was, we had Ryan a little bit later in life. So I had been an executive assistant, 20 something years, right? Yeah. So I'd worked with really top COOs and CEOs and marketing executives. And so I had a really good idea from a corporate standpoint and like kind of a business standpoint, what we needed to do. Mm-hmm. And, but what was funny about it was we had Ryan 2003 and, after I had Ryan, John's like, well, when are you going to go back to work? And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go
like,
back to, I'm not going back to corporate. And he's like, what are you going to do? And I go, I'm going to market your company.
Mm.
And when I was watching him, run around, flying by the seat of his pants, doing all these things, very
But I was
busy.
doing it so well.
And he was doing, and he was very busy, but I was like, let's figure out what we're really doing here. What's really happening here. Right.
Mm.
And it is scary because I had always had a steady income. I wasn't somebody that could ever like go on commission or work, for yourself to figure this out. So yeah, it was a really big decision. So I said, you know what? I think we should take a marketing class. So we went to this like 1-day marketing class at ACC.
Oh, cool.
And there was an extremely dynamic teacher, and her name is Corey Howell. And I will say her name because she has Corey Howell Photography now, and she's very, very successful. But at the time, she gave this marketing class, and I was like, when I finished the class, I looked at John and go, we need to hire her for 1 day, just to map this out, right?
Great idea.
And we certainly did. We hired her for 1 day, and she basically looked at me and she said, don't you ever go back to work. One, John, stop doing the $6 an hour job. Like she gave us some really good points, and she said, she kind of helped us frame out like there's a lot of extra activity going on, but there's nothing, let's focus on what's really going to work for you. So it was pretty interesting. We spent the day with her, and then we just kind of devised this plan. So I told him, I was like, this is where I think we shine, right? This is where you shine. This is where, the return of investment works. I mean, everything pointed to the service, business to business service of going out and serving coffee. And so, and doing the mobile espresso bar. So it was scary. But he was so passionate about it. And I was so in tune to his passion about it that I was like, let's do this. I was determined. I was like, let's go. So, like I said, we started with these little small, breakfast meeting groups. And within a year, we went from that being maybe 10% of our income to, like 100%. That was what we were doing.
Wow.
Jeez.
And what was funny about it, I'll say that with this caveat, because over the years, it did take a little while for it to really become our main income, because it was very seasonal when we first started. So coffee wasn't
like October to
it was
through
like
the December, the
like
holidays.
the fall was when we did most of our business. And
This
so
was before iced coffee.
yeah, iced coffee. Yeah,
Wow, that's so crazy.
It was funny because we did have a cold brew. John was a little bit ahead of his time every time, but he had a cold brew, but nobody really knew what that was.
Yeah.
And so, nobody was drinking cold coffee. I wasn't drinking cold coffee. I was like, I don't want that. I want hot. So it was very seasonal. So then we would work for the first 10 years that we did this together. We would work our tails off between like September and December, and then maybe do 1 or 2 a month for the rest of the time. So he was in real estate. I would go get, like part-time jobs doing accounting or a QuickBook. I was self-taught in QuickBooks, so I could do our own books and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we would work other things, and then the season would hit and we would do crazy amounts of work. So at the height of John and I doing it by ourselves, we had already added food. We were doing full-blown breakfast, chafing dishes, eggs. I mean, we were doing yogurt, fruit, everything.
We had finally grown into a location with a chef. We had.
Well, that was at the height of it. But when just John and I doing it, I think our biggest year in that time between Thanksgiving and Christmas was like our busiest time. Everybody wanted to do something for the holidays.
Yeah.
We did 32 events in 17 days. Me and John, just us two. And so
32 events in 17 days.
Yeah, just me and John. So then January would come, we'd be like,
oh, I bet.
like let's take a break, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of happened. Well, after like every year at the end of our at the end of it,
At the end
of the season, we'd sit down and we'd say, okay, do we want to grow? Like, what does that look like? So for us, growing, especially in the early years, was into a location, right? It was like, oh, we're
Yeah.
going to
More
grow into a
employees,
location.
a bigger location.
But we want to, and we go, oh, employees, location. Nah, we don't want to do that.
I think we're
right?
good.
We're good.
We were self-sustaining.
Yeah.
So
We
we
were
just,
making it.
we kept doing that for like 10 years. And then finally the coffee
It took
culture.
It took a life of its own, and this
Yeah.
business concept. It took a life of its own. I mean, it just we were like, oh my gosh, we're getting more business, and we're not really marketing, and
We
and we're getting more
never
business and more business. We're like, okay, now we have to grow,
Yeah.
and we do need more employees. We need a bigger space,
Well, but at the end of that 10 years, we really literally sat down and we were like, okay, what's going on here? Because we are literally stunting the growth of this business, but it keeps growing. Like, what's going on? And I said, we're not really a coffee company. Like, we always thought of ourselves as a coffee company. But then roasting got real big, and we're not roasters. We worked with our local roaster, but
Right.
that did all of John's blends, but we weren't roasting coffee. We weren't, going out to the farmers and buying we weren't doing that. And so I was like, what is it that we're doing right? And that's when we came up with the concept of, we have the repeat business was so big for us that we didn't have to go out and get a new business. And so I was like, I know what we're doing. We're building relationships. We're just doing it one cup at a time. And then that became our tagline.
And then we realized we were really a hospitality.
We're a hospitality company.
And just really good at what we're
We just
doing.
had really
building
good coffee.
relationship.
But can we
That's
just
so cool.
slow down and talk about how it took you 10 to 15 to 20 years to figure that out?
Yeah.
Wait, so you're saying you didn't just start a business with a perfect concept and a perfect plan and a perfect model? You figured it out along the way?
Yeah, it was just
crazy.
It was just slowly, a little bit by little bit, we would just like doing the high end events was a big portion of our business in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, and I say that kind of in like jest because a lot of people before they get into entrepreneurship are thinking, well, I have to have it all figured out.
No.
I got to have the right plan. I got to have the right model. I got to research this and research that. And they miss the main point that 80% is really just jumping in and figuring out. Yeah, you went and you worked for the espresso company, you learned the business, you saw the market, you did your due diligence.
Right.
But you jumped in.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys jumped in and you made it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point because we literally have pivoted every step of the way.
Yeah.
The only thing we didn't do, and I'm glad we didn't do it, we had sort of our own little like thing going, and we just didn't jump into the fad of everything. It was like, okay, Starbucks or whatever. We used to say at our coffee bars, we don't say the S word in our house. But they would, they're a great marketing company is what they are.
Yeah.
And they
for sure.
I didn't think they were a great coffee company. There's some people who love their coffee, but it was like they were a great marketing company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was more consistent, and you had all your executives and your tech people who did travel the world. Where were they going to get coffee on a consistent basis?
Yes.
When they would come back home, they're like, oh, we went to a Starbucks because you can get it in Atlanta. You can get it in all these major cities around the world because Starbucks was growing and they were starting to infiltrate major cities.
Yes.
They just hadn't come to Austin yet.
Okay.
And so when people came home, they're like, oh man, so coffee is really big on the West Coast and the East Coast. And it started trickling down into the central states where we were.
But we were determined to stick with our plan, which was authentic Italian coffee, like the prepared by a skilled barista, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're never going to just press a button and serve coffee. So we're never, ever standing there serving coffee. So I think as much as we've had to pivot to every time we call it niches, that we have different niches that we work at. But every time we would lose one niche, we would just get another one. We're like, all right, it's changing from that model. Let's just go to this model, right? And it was the same concept. It was the same hospitality driven, like we're serving you. We want to serve you, right?
Yeah.
So it was the same concept, but it was just like a different niche. Oh, well, maybe we can move over here. So like we would go we used to do all the financial,
From Merrill Lynch,
UBS,
Wells Fargo.
just all the financial offices for the longest time, John would go in there just as, dressed to the nines as a one-man show. And he would assist all of the wholesalers that were coming in and wanting to talk to the financial advisors, right? And he became part of their team, basically.
Yeah.
And so whenever we would go into the offices, all the financial advisors knew him. John knew who the administrative staff was, who they needed to talk to, right? So he would just kind of set the stage for them to have the right people in front of them, right?
Yeah.
But all the while we were serving this amazing coffee to these people and they were like, oh my God, we love this, right? So that was a really big deal. And then something legal happened and you couldn't pay for things. It was one of those legal things.
It was a law. The laws
The
changed
law
and how much
changed.
money you could spend per employee when you were doing wholesale things like that. So that was one of the niches that kind of dried up.
So that niche kind of went away. But then as that one went away, we were like building on the property managers that were doing, tenant events.
And small companies.
And then all of a sudden we got teacher appreciation, right? It was like, oh, we need you for our teacher.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of schools that we work at, right? So every time
so many good opportunities.
One niche, right? We would be like, oh. And again, it was still educating people because a lot of people would see our coffee bar and they'd go, oh, this would be great. You could sell your coffee at our festival, or you could. I was like, oh wait, we don't do that. Like we don't.
We used to. We really stayed in our lane of not being a retail cart.
We're like, no.
Because then when I first built my cart, that's what I had built to do, was to go out and sell cappuccinos. I would set up at different locations around town in buildings. I got to know a lot of people in different high rises that had little kiosks or restaurants in the buildings, but they didn't have a coffee bar. And so they would let me set up 1 or 2 days a week in there. So that's when I was rolling by myself at the very beginning. Stages,
One man
show.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it seems like you do so well is you guys would find success for a period of time, but then you would kind of just take a step back and analyze like where you're at and the situation, the circumstances you're in, and then pivot, like you said.
Yeah.
And then that also has been, I think, it seems like a testament of your success, because instead of just jumping from fad to fad, you've stayed true to because you knew that you had a good service, a good product. And so you stayed true to that. And that's been a testament of your long-term success, it seems like.
And you knew when to say no.
Yeah.
It's so hard for business owners they're like, oh, yes, this opportunity. Yes, this opportunity. Yes, this opportunity. And that's what you were doing early on with all these different things. And you get so spread thin.
Yeah, you
can
really get caught up into it.
To look at your books and you're like, I'm not even making any money.
After the 10-year thing, when we were like, we could do buckshot.
It's
like we don't. That's not
do this and this.
We can do that, but it's like this is our sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
And it did take. I mean, it seems like that was like something that just came really natural to us. But what it really was, I think, we sat down with a business coach one year, that year when we couldn't figure out why we were growing, when we weren't really trying to.
That's what we were. That's why I always wanted to find out what my passion was. Really, like, never knew. It was like, you always hear that. If you could find your passion, you really never work a day in your life. And I was like, really, what is my passion?
What's my passion? What's my God-given talent, right? What am I here for? And we really worked, and it was so funny the way that process went, because he was faith-based as well as we are, right? And he was like, all right, let's just kind of work this through. And he goes, when you find what your passion is, you're going to know it's going to you're going to be overtaken with emotion, right? And so literally the minute we worked with him for months, and the minute we said something about hospitality, that John had that.
That's when it was
like, oh my God.
There was just a rush over my body.
Yeah.
It was
I was like, your passion is hospitality. And it was funny because I was like, I'm a little tougher, right? I'm a little tougher cookie. And I was like, yeah, you're not going to get me to do that. You're not going to break me that way. And so it wasn't actually in a session with him. I was talking to one of my friends, and we were talking about something, and I can't even remember how it went, but I said, I anticipate needs, that's what I'm good at. And when I said that, I got that rush too. And I was like, so this is why we're successful, because John's hospitality, mine's anticipating the needs of others. This is our passion.
We're a dynamic
Man.
This is
duo.
what we do
Yeah.
naturally, authentically.
Mhm.
That's why everybody was drawn to us
Yeah.
as a couple
Mhm.
doing this business. We were like, why are we getting so much repeat business? We literally would sit down in the first few years and go, okay, we made that much money. Are we going to do that again? Or we kept trying to add services, and we don't want them to like let us go,
Yeah.
because what if they
We'll
don't
add
want just
food.
coffee?
We'll add this.
We
We'll
just
add
kept
that.
adding things to it until we were doing this full breakfast, and we were literally catering is a very hard,
Yeah.
It's hard, especially with just the two of
Physical
us and
company.
maybe a couple of part-time
Yeah.
employees.
and
We
then
did that
Yeah.
for a number of years, and that's
Yeah.
when we were like, okay, we need to.
what is it that?
What is it that
It's the coffee.
we analyzed it,
Yeah.
all the money that was being spent through the coffee and the doing the catering, the food end of it, and all of that, and we're like, well, we're not making all that money on the food end of it. What's really making us successful? And it was back to the coffee.
Yeah.
Let's focus on what.
So do you guys think that you would have found that passion if you hadn't have jumped in to the business initially?
Well, it's funny when I look back on it, because I was working in the profession that is all about anticipating.
Right.
the needs
You
of
were-
others.
Yeah, yeah.
I was in a role that I was meant to be in, which was, anticipate the needs of my CEO or my COO or whoever.
Mhm.
The interesting thing about that was I had to learn that there is a way to be in corporate, because corporate is a monster, right?
Yeah.
But there is a way to be in corporate without selling your soul.
Yeah.
That's
But
tough.
it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's very hard. And
Mm.
it's so, there's so much competition, and, it's dog eat dog kind of world.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it was refreshing for me to be able to utilize that skill and that
Mm.
passion.
Okay. Yeah.
In a
On your
different-
own.
Yeah, in my own, at my own pace, in my own setting.
And
For-
then as
for John,
myself
yeah.
is going back in early years, like when I moved to New Orleans, I was bartending, and I loved that. You're
Mhm.
talking to people. But what I realized years later, as I'm bartending and talking to people, interacting, when you're bartending, you don't really get the real person. It gets exaggerated from the other party
Yeah.
the longer you're drinking.
Sure.
Coffee in the morning, you get that real person.
Mm.
That's true.
So when I say, how's your morning? You really get the true thoughts, how their day's going,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I'm making a drink for an espresso, it takes you 30 seconds to a minute to make that drink. Well, that's why the whole Italian, when they created this, it was to get to know your neighbors in your neighborhood. It's like there's so many espresso bars in Italy that all the neighbors come from around to that one coffee bar. But that's how they interact with each other. That's how they get to know each other.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's your
Wow.
social aspect of it.
Yeah.
So when I started doing the hospitals, I would get to know every doctor, every nurse, everybody that was coming to work. I got to know them and their drinks, and it was just invigorating.
Yeah.
Wow.
It made it fun at that point.
Mm.
That's where I was like, well, I'm having a great time doing this and making a living.
Yeah.
There's something
Yeah.
here.
That's
Mm.
that's it right there. So, what would you say to a couple who wants to get into entrepreneurship and they want to do it together? What is the key to maintaining a healthy marriage while also maintaining a healthy working relationship?
Okay, wait. Before we start,
Yeah.
hold that thought. I gotta go.
Gotta go. I don't figure that.
I figured.
I'm already late.
I know.
Can you check and see if
Hey.
that camera's still
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
No,
That's okay. That's okay.
No, it's so exciting.
on? Zach has a real job. He's
It's
got to
very
do.
nice meeting you.
Okay, yeah, that
You
one's
as
good.
well. I wish I could stay.
I know.
Now when you're
I'll
editing
call in
this,
sick.
Yeah.
now when you're editing this, you'll actually be listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, right?
Oh, that'll be
Yeah.
fun. That'll be fun for you.
All right. Continue. You guys
Okay.
continue.
That is such an interesting question. We've, I think, first and foremost for us, having a good foundation in the beginning. John and I came together like I said, later in life, but we had a good sense of what we wanted
Mhm.
from a partner. and out of our marriage. And so we had a really good foundation, faith-based,
Yeah.
and just that started it, right? And we had fun together. When we worked together over those 10 years, there were some interesting,
tense moments.
there were some interesting times. And I think
we really learned how to yield to one another. I'd say that's probably a big thing. We're both Leos, and Leos don't like to yield to one another. It's I want to be the one that's right. No, I want to be the one that's right. So as we would hammer ideas off of each other, we learned really to yield to one another, and I think that's one of the biggest.
That was one, and then the second one is we learned that there has to be a stopping point of talking about the business, because we went years talking 24/7 about the business, and we never got a break from it. We never got a break. We were just like, when we weren't working, we were talking about ideas and things, and we should do this and that. And I feel like we finally, as we matured into the roles that we were doing, and it was hard, but we had to cut it off. We had to say, like, when we go home, we can't talk about this.
So hard to do. We still do it.
We still do it, but we catch ourselves and we're like, okay, remember, we're not talking about this. So if setting up meetings, meeting times,
parameters
and parameters around when you're going to talk about the business and work on the business. The hardest part about being an owner operator in a small company is you can't work on the business while you're working in the business. So we would work so hard in the business that was really, really like it took all of our brain power and energy. And so it was very little. We had to carve out time to work on the business, right?
So tough.
So so that's what I think that's the biggest thing. It's like really setting up parameters around when you're going to discuss. And we're good at recognizing when the other person can't hear what we're saying. And we're good at so we're like, okay, I can't talk to you about this right now. We'll just take this up later.
Put that on the shelf for a day or two.
So I think that's the key. But it is not for the faint of heart in a marriage to work together 24/7.
It's hard to do.
It could be hard because it was so funny. After the COVID hit, and we had no events for 10 months, and we were like sitting at the house. We're like, it gave us a lot of good time to reflect. So we're reflecting on our business, and I was like, it's afforded us an opportunity because it's event driven to almost seem, of course, this is very tricky also, owner operator, lesson learned.
Yeah.
That when you don't have events, then you're still working. You still have to work on the business. But for us, we were so time intensive and so labor intensive, our working in the business, that when we didn't have an event, we were off. Like we were like, okay, we don't have an event, we're off. So it gave us like this almost sense of semi-retirement, right? And so we were like, okay, when we have work, and when we don't, we can go on vacation, we can homeschool our kid, we can do all these things that most people don't have the ability to do, right? Because they're working 8 to 5 or they only have this much time. So we enjoyed that part of it. But sitting at home during COVID, we were like, I just kept telling John, I'm like, I feel like I'm being called to just do something else, because what else are we going to talk about in retirement? We have nothing else. We have literally been together 24/7 for the past
That's all we talk about is our events and our coffee and
our customers and our business. And, and so that sort of put me in a different trajectory at the time. And I was like, I think I need to go get a job. And he's like, well, what would you do? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'd be good at mortgage is what I said. Exactly. And he's like, okay. And I was like, I like people. I like problem solving. I like numbers. This makes sense.
A good challenge.
And I love a good challenge. Don't ever tell me I can't learn something, because I will learn it.
Yeah.
So basically, I did that for the past 3 years, and I was I learned a lot about myself in that 3 years, kind of being away from the business. Now, I didn't stop working for Johnny Beans at all. I did both jobs. So I'm working 10 or 12-hour days in mortgage, which is quite a beast. And learning it, having to learn it and loving doing that. But I'm also still doing all the things that I did for Johnny Beans, accounting, payroll, proposals, invoices, doing all of that. Right. So it's kind of doing both jobs for the past 3 years. And I was a little hesitant to would I ever want to come back to Johnny Beans? Right. And again, it was like, what are we going to talk about when we retire?
Yeah.
We've been talking for 10, 20 years.
We'll have to start another business.
Yeah. But I recently did quit that job, and actually I said it to John yesterday. I was like, I'm glad to be back at Johnny Beans. And he's like, we're glad to have you back. Right?
Yeah.
Because we used to joke about the fact that every 6 months I would quit or he would fire me. So as a couple, we'd be like, well, every 6 months I either quit or fire. This is not going to work out. But I sat down with, ironically enough, I talked about Corey Howell, the marketing person. So she ended up getting out of marketing and design. She helped us design that little logo that we have with the Johnny Bean guy. But I met up with her not too long ago, and it had been years since I had spoken with her or seen her. And I was working for the marketing company, and I was telling her all about it. And I was still talking about Johnny Beans. And she looked at me and she said, you need to quit that job. And I just looked at her and she said, if you are still talking about Johnny Beans with such passion, that why are you doing this other thing? Right. And she was right. She was right. I think that in and of itself, we talk about when you get older and you want to do less work and retire, it's like John and I still have this passion for what we do, and it is rooted in hospitality. It's rooted in us serving other people. That's what we do. We love serving other people, and we get when we serve others in the authentic, intentional way that we do, it brings us joy. Right. We are the ones who get back from that, right? So I feel like that's
we feel that's a major. It's really important for us too, with our employees too, is to teach them as we get students or high school students that come on with us, or even adults. We're always teaching them things that we have learned over the years. Whenever they leave here, doing what they do in life, they're going to take something of what we have been able to teach them, whether it's speaking with people, eye contact, the little things that they don't teach you in school about going to get, like if you're going for a job interview, what to say, when not to say, things like that.
Yeah. Sorry, let me pause real quick. This camera turned off. Just got to turn it back on. Overheats sometimes. So.
Dude, did you wipe out or something? What happened?
Oh, yeah. I went longboarding with Zach and a few of our other friends.
Ooh, longboarding.
Oh, Lord.
And I'm not a skateboarder.
Yeah, those are hard.
They took me down a hill I was not ready for.
I learned that way early.
Oh, man, those hills,
like,
too.
You guys are some kind of friends,
Yeah,
man.
thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. And it was dark. It was like pitch black outside.
Seriously.
No street lights on this bridge. And I was just like...
Get
the wobbles, and then
you get the wobble, and it's like, no.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty brutal.
Is that the battery that's
that
eating up
looks
on
like
you?
it?
Yeah. We need to see that one. It has a faux battery where you put. It's like a plastic casing it looks like a battery, and you put it in, but it's not a lithium battery. It just plugs into that charger, right? And so we need to get one of those for these, because those actually don't overheat, but these will.
Yeah.
These will overheat after a while if you're not careful. So that's the thing. Okay, so you work for this mortgage company, and then one second, actually, So you work for this mortgage company, and you kind of rediscover yourself again. And then you're like, you know what? I really do love Johnny Beans. And so I feel like that kind of brings us up to present day, right? You just can't, you're back full time.
back in the swing of things. Yeah, Johnny Beans has been sustaining itself, right?
Yeah.
So in the niches that we have, there's a lot of the communities of, say, like property managers. There's a community of, these workers that they just move to each other. So that's how we would grow, right? We would
Just
be like,
you keep those relationships.
we have a
You
relationship
build
with this, right?
relationships, and that's really what the business
We'd
is
have
about.
relationship with this one property manager. Then she'd move to a different company, right? And she'd go,
Right.
oh, I need to do this for my company, right? So
Right.
it kind of would grow like that. So we never did a lot of advertising or we have literally stayed very mom and pop. Like we used
Yeah.
to laugh and say that we're Austin's best kept secret and, all those things. Now we want to grow. That's what we want to do.
Sure.
But
And
how big do we want to grow? Because so many people have approached us and said, is this a franchise? Just because of how professional we do things.
Wow.
And we thought,
That's a compliment.
man, do we want a franchise? Do we want to grow this? And I was like, I think
Yeah,
we
we're still in
do.
those
I don't know
stages.
if we want a franchise, but I think to grow the business to where we can expand and license territories, I think that might be the next step for us.
Mm.
And we're still trying to figure that out, us youngins. But again, we're going to stay true to what we've always done, which is we are focused on serving others and building relationships one cup at a time, right?
Mm.
And so we're celebrating 30 years.
Congratulations.
This
Thank
year,
you.
yeah.
So so we've got a logo that we had designed just specifically for the 30 years. We're putting together some marketing kits. I feel like it's time for us now to intentionally go out and get some new business, people who haven't heard about us, who don't know who we are.
Yeah.
And so we get to handpick who that is,
Yeah.
who we target for that. And our wheelhouse, is property managers can be kind of tricky. Like downtown, we don't have a lot of downtown buildings, and it's because they normally have a coffee bar in their building, right?
Yeah. The high rises,
They already have a coffee bar right there or in their building. So it's like having us as a treat for their tenants isn't as enticing. Every once in a while they'll do it, but it's kind of hard. So we do a lot of the conferences for hotels. So that's a really big deal for us right now. A lot of hotels that have conferences, they don't have their own unique coffee bar, set up. So we are preferred vendors for the Fairmont and JW Marriott and a couple of other hotel chains that, whenever somebody that's doing a conference wants a coffee bar, they call us to come in and do it. So we want to focus our, attention in those areas and sort of build it up that way. Our biggest challenge as like everybody, it's not just us. The biggest challenge in any business is
finding the right
employees. And so when we are looking for employees, which we're always looking for, baristas to come in, and we train them up. They start at a certain level and they get to train up to what we call a master barista. We're always, the first question we ask people is, what's your passion? And it doesn't have to be coffee.
Yeah.
We actually prefer that you don't have a lot of experience in being a barista, because then those people are kind of set in their ways, and
you just got to be passionate about something. And if not, we'll help you find that passion.
Wow. I love that. I think, well, one thing that you said about relationships real quick is like, I'm realizing that in my stage of business right now is how important relationships are and how long it takes. It's one of the biggest hacks to a successful business, but because it's not a kind of marketing that you can just click a button and pay $10,000 for and you have a relationship.
It's an intangible.
It's an intangible thing.
Right. It's something that has to be fostered and taught and practiced. And we talk a lot about.
You have to refine.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the dance that happens behind the bar. because it is a muscle memory thing, right? It becomes a muscle memory thing. Once you do it over and over and over and over, it just comes natural, right? And so it's interesting when we talk about our authentic selves, right? Because we're authentically that, hospitality, anticipating the needs of others. That's our authentic gifts. And so that shows when we're building our relationships. But when we have new people that come in that maybe don't have that skill or need to acquire that skill, I think that the first thing that they really have to understand is follow what we do, like follow the steps that we're telling you, right? Once it becomes muscle memory for you behind the bar, then, and once the action of what you're doing as a
Then
barista,
you can grow.
then you can be authentically yourself, right?
Then you can add a little something or do your way of
Yeah.
doing
I see.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, once you learn that, like John's got 5 or 6 points that every barista has to learn, and it's about connecting with the customer eye to eye, ask it in certain questions. Like the quintessential coffee bar question is, what do you have?
Yeah.
What are you having? What can I get you today?
Yeah.
But that's not the question we ask. We are very personal, intentional in the things that we teach our baristas to ask. And
It has to be such a natural setting too, because sometimes you can get over zealous and it sounds staged and it sounds canned,
That's a good point.
It has to be very natural.
It can overwhelm the customer.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a customer walking up to something they haven't seen before?
Yeah.
There's this bar and it's serving what? Coffee.
Yeah, some people like, is
some
it
people
free?
just
What
kind
do
of
we
like,
do?
yeah, is this for me? Is it not for me? So they're trying to process who we are, what we are, in that first few seconds that they're walking up. So if you're overzealous, what can I get you? How are you doing today? I mean, people are just like, I don't even know what to say. They're trying to look at the menu. They're trying to assess what is going on here, right? So we're very aware of what the experience is. We want our baristas to create the best experience for the customer.
And it has to be natural. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of wisdom to what you're saying too. I was listening to a really wealthy entrepreneur the other day talk about how we may think that information is like the most valuable thing we have right now. And he was saying, actually, the thing that everyone's seeking is what to do with the information.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you guys have like so wisely figured out is you help people make choices. And I think that so often, even in sales, people just need help making a decision.
Right.
Like even when I go up to a coffee bar, just like what Zach said, it's just kind of like,
it's overwhelming.
My gosh, what
where do I
what is
start?
this? What is all this stuff I don't know anything about? And for someone to say, hey, would you like to try our locomotion?
Right.
What's that? Let me tell you about it. It's our award-winning espresso with, and it's like,
yeah, you were really good at that.
Hey, it's crazy. But everything you're describing, I got to go into the event with you at Brown Lake High School, and I got to see the beginning of the process, and I got to be like the very first person in the process to learn that. And I caught myself several times saying, "What can I get you?" And then I was like, "Oh, next person." And I would say, "Would you like to try this?" And then it was this totally different.
And it's such
response.
a relaxed. If you can just calm it to a relaxed atmosphere, and like in our minds back there, we're making shots, we're grinding, we're making sure there's 20 things going on, but we don't
show that
to the customer.
Yes,
the customer has no idea that we are like so calm. How are you doing? But in the meantime, I'm like watching the beans, steaming the milk to a certain temperature, making sure the foam is just perfect for the shot for the espresso. And that, then we're talking 2 or 3 people deep. So you keep this audience and they're all
captivated.
Captivate the audience for a second. And then as the line comes forward, everyone's still captivated. Like, what's going on over here? You know, it's such an event.
That's
it's
so
such an
true.
Experience, right?
Yeah. And I think that experience is huge. I mean, especially I think that God definitely put both of us together because I feel like I have so much to learn on the experience side from you guys. And in terms of, we call this thing the second floor experience, right?
Right,
For a reason, because we feel like there's a great need in the younger generation and my generation for something that is natural and organic. It's not forced to be on social media. It's not forced interaction. but it's an
Right.
environment by which you can have an experience of genuine, authentic connection with someone else, not through a
Absolutely.
screen, right? Not with a
Right.
filter,
Right.
but just to sit here and say, like, what's your story? And
Right.
to just let you talk.
I think you hit the nail on the head just now when you said, especially in this generation, there's so much information.
So much.
We're just bombarded with more and more information. It's like, what do I do with this
Slow
information?
down.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, we talk about evolving, right? Like what happens when the generation gets too much stimuli and they're
Mhm.
too much, like, what do I do with this? Right. And I was talking to Ryan, my son, my youngest, about this the other day because he was talking about the fact that again, the anxiety comes from the
Yes.
idea that we have all this stuff and we don't know what to do with it, right?
100%.
And I said that's why it's very important not to erase history, because that's when you go back and you can come up with a million reasons why this shouldn't have been done in the past and that shouldn't have been done in the past and we should have done it this way and that way. You can't take the eyes of today and judge the eyes of
So
the
true.
history, but you need to learn from the history. And there's always things that you can go back to that we as a culture, as a people, as humans, always kind of like, that's why retro things become and vintage things become important again, and they become very expensive items, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh, retro, like
Classic rock.
right? Yeah,
Exactly.
We're always gonna love our classic rock.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, that's why I told Ryan, I was like, that's why you don't erase history.
Mhm.
There's always something you can learn from it and take back, because the foundation of it is there.
Mhm.
And then it evolves, and it always comes back to the foundation.
Mm.
And then it evolves and it comes back to the foundation. So again, I feel like that's something that we probably do so authentically that we don't even know we're doing it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just come back to our foundation. It's like, we don't ever worry that we lost a niche,
Mhm.
because we're like, we're so passionate about our foundation, right? We know what we're doing
We trust.
and we trust God a lot too, but we know what we're doing in such a authentic way that we can do it anywhere. We can
Yes.
do it with anything. It's like, we just happen to have really good coffee to do it
Yeah.
with, right?
Right.
But
And
you can use these skill sets in
Mhm.
anything that you do.
And that's one thing you reminded me too, I was going to say earlier, is when you're describing what you give, what you offer your employees as an employer, is you will leave here better than
Right.
you came in.
That's our desire for our
That's your
employees.
desire.
Right.
And I'm blessed enough to be in a place where my employer and my business partner is also the same way. But I know that there's a lot of my friends who have never had an experience like that.
Right.
It's much more of almost like a parasite, where they come in and the employer's like, how much can I
How much
suck
can
out
I get
of
from
you
you? Yeah.
until you leave? And it leaves them burnout, disempowered, and
Mhm.
frustrated going into their next thing.
Right.
And so I feel like you guys are doing much more of a classical approach, sort of like what I would imagine it used to be like, where you'd come into a company and they'd say, hey, we're going to offer you these skills,
Mhm.
not just money, but we're going to offer you these
Some
skills,
personable.
some
We
personal
want
skills,
you to be the best version of
to
yourself.
be
We
the
want you
best
to
version
leave
of you.
here better
Yes.
than
a place where you
right.
can find, you said literally, we want you to help you find your passion.
Right.
Like, to leave a place knowing that at least I'm one step or two steps or three steps closer to what I want to do with my life
Mhm.
is honestly, to me, invaluable.
Right.
No matter like how much money I made. That's why I think a lot of 20-year-olds and people in their 20s get so caught up with like, how much can I make coming out of college? How much can I make coming out? And it's like,
Right. It's all
this is
money
not
focused.
the time to earn. It's the time to learn.
To learn.
Oh,
Oh,
I like
I
that.
love
I
that.
You
love
need to
it.
learn.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like the skills you're gaining are worth immeasurable more than
Mhm.
a salary would
Yeah.
be, or even a
Right.
commission would be.
Right.
It's what kind of things can you learn? Take a lower salary, take a lower pay.
Find your
Right.
passion,
So that you
because
can
get
learn.
excited about something.
Get around
Right.
people that
Because
will
when you're
teach you.
excited about something, it shows to
You
the
will be able
outside
to make
world.
money. Yeah.
So
you'll-
easily.
The
you'll
money
be able-
comes.
The
money
It
will
just-
come.
It just trust the
It's-
system.
That's what I've learned even about, especially about business as well, and I'm sure you guys have figured this out, is the revenue comes as the effect.
Right.
It's the last thing that
Right.
comes.
Right.
The cause and everything else before that is the authenticity,
Right.
the experience, the the mastery of an
Mm-hmm.
espresso, the
Right.
attention to detail of your product and your experience.
Mhm.
All that's like the 80-90%. And then you look at your numbers at the end of the month and you're like, oh, cool. I'm glad we made some money.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think culturally that is such a focus.
Mhm.
Like success means you have these cars and this house
Mhm.
and these things. And I think, anybody who is telling, who's not blowing smoke
Right.
is telling you that the money is not where the happiness comes. I mean, having the
Right.
things does not bring you fulfillment, does not bring you the happiness. So it's such a facade that
It is.
our young people have to like live through this idea that, being successful means you make this much money and you have these many things. And it's just not, it's just a lie. It's a
It is.
lie.
It literally is.
And, and most
It's
people learn
marketing.
it the hard way.
It's marketing.
It's marketing.
And that's what our generation struggles with. You talked about anxiety and
Yeah.
you called it overstimulation, which I was going to say too. It is overstimulation. And we get to this point where
It's too much.
we're just like freaked out all the time
Right.
about how much we feel like we're behind, how much we feel like we
Absolutely.
don't have, because it's thrown in our face all the time on social media. And what you have is these top 1% of, if you use me for an example, of 20-year-olds who have figured out how to make all this money online, right? And so they're like multimillionaires at 25. And then you see that, but they're able to blast it out and make the 1% look like 99%.
Right,
And so you're like, well, I'm
exactly.
the only one out here who's not
Yeah.
doing well.
Mhm.
And it creates this facade you mentioned,
does.
which
And then depression.
exactly, and then
anxiety
cause
comes
that
in. I was
depression,
like, how come
anxiety.
I can't do
Why am I
that.
you
not
lose your
doing enough?
confidence,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing enough. And so now you start to put your identity in how hard you're working, and then maybe eventually you make the money only to realize at the expense of all the relationships in your life, it doesn't fulfill you.
It
Imagine
doesn't
that.
fulfill you, right? It doesn't. It's so funny. I keep going back to Ryan because, he is our youngest and he's in this culture right now, and he does recognize the social media stuff it has such an impact on his self-esteem, his like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? That kind of thing. I lost my train of thought, what I was going with that. But the interesting thing about that with him is he feels like if he's not on the social media, he's not connected.
Isn't that interesting?
It's so interesting. He's like, well, I don't know what my friends are doing then, or I don't know what what's going on, or I'm not. I don't have
Everybody relies on the
my finger on the
electronics versus
pulse.
being in person.
And I'm like, no, that's so the opposite, and I understand that, culturally this is, where I used to say when I was younger, who is they? When you say, what they say, I would always go, who is they?
Yeah.
Well, there is a they.
Yeah.
And the powers that be want you guys to be this distracted. They want you to be this, to be this anxiety ridden. They want you to be disconnected.
Off balance.
And it's such a facade of, like you said, this guy has everything, or these people have everything, and nothing on the internet, nothing on social media is the reality.
Gosh, that's so true.
It's the perceived,
And it's difficult, especially after COVID, to have a third place for young people that's meant for connection.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was like, well, you can go to the gym, but everyone has their headphones on. Everyone's trying to get a workout in and go. And then, you don't want to really approach anyone because it's like everyone's got their phones recording. You don't want to like be seen as a creep. And then, well, if you have faith, then maybe you go to a place of worship like church or something. But that's what, 1 hour, maybe 2 hours a week.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, how am I supposed to build connection there? And then, well, if I work remotely, or if I don't like people at my job,
right,
where do I go? Even the library, like.
Yeah,
there's just no place
Ryan,
to
we
go.
say that.
No place to go.
There's no place for the teens to the 20 to go to do. You have to find
for connection.
You got to find a sport activity. I always love the idea of the skating rink, bringing the skating rink back.
Yeah.
You know,
Something.
And even
something for
Something.
them to go and gather.
and I
Yes.
feel
Coffee
like
shops were one,
but
then
they
again,
they've
that
become
it's-
something else now.
Exactly.
A coffee
Yeah.
shop is not a place that you go. Like everybody's sitting, like you said, on their with their
Mhm.
AirPods in, and they're like sitting on with looking at their computer or their
Yes.
phone. Nobody's like communally talking or
Hanging
you know
out.
hanging out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you got to be quiet for the people that are working.
Yeah.
So no, I think the concept of yes, having a place for true, authentic connection.
Mm.
Right. And again, that's what we do for an hour and a half to
Exactly.
2 hours. We provide that place for true, authentic community to come together and they get to learn. They get to learn about themselves. They get to learn about coffee, you know, and then we make it fun. We make it interesting and we bring, you know, all that noise down to this one cup of coffee, you know, where you can be quiet and just have a minute to
Yeah.
think about,
Mhm.
you know, or just to be authentically
Right.
yourself, because you cannot be authentically yourself on social media in the
difficult.
culture today. It's very, very hard.
Yeah,
Really
it's a
tough.
facade.
Yeah, really tough. And that's another thing I think with the skating rink idea, it points to a deeper concept of there really needs to be a reason to get together. As minimal as the reason could be, simply, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an insane thing. And that's where Zach and I, when we were thinking about all this, we overcomplicated things so quickly because we're like, well, it has to be this and has all this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
aren't we
Get back
already
to the
overstimulated?
basics.
Let's just get back to the basics.
Right.
Of,
Right.
if we provide a space that has a vibe that is just meant for, it has much less stimulation.
Yes.
And you just input a few concepts that make it pointed and a lot easier to connect. And you just take
Let
your
it
hands
happen.
off. Let it hands off. Don't
Right, right.
try to control everything of, oh, it's speed networking or it's speed dating. You only have 30 seconds to do it. It's just let people organically, what you said,
Mhm.
it has to be natural.
Mhm.
Or else people will feel like forced and then they'll put on their face and then it's,
Well, yeah,
we're at the
people
same
are,
problem.
they're not just overstimulated, they're tired.
yes. Oh
They're
my gosh.
tired of you know, it's like that's what overstimulation does, right? It just
Yeah.
wears your
Wears
brain
you
out.
down.
And it's like, oh my gosh, well, I just want to like be able to, I think, you know, young people don't have the opportunity to just relax and think and be themselves,
Mm.
right? Because you're always worried about,
How
am I
being
doing enough?
perceived?
Am I
Yeah.
being enough? Am I, you know,
What's everyone thinking about
yeah,
me?
what's everybody thinking, you know?
Yeah.
Do I have the right clothes on? Do I have the right, and that is something that happens in every generation, but
True.
with the overstimulation and the over obsessiveness of like anything you say, do, or, you know, think can be photographed, can be, you know, go viral, you can make a mistake and that can just like take
It can
off
set you
and
back.
everybody
It'll-
in the whole world can see it. right?
Exactly. Isn't that crazy?
That is
Like,
so
could you imagine growing up knowing that if
in
you
a-
made one mistake and it got on video
Right.
instantly,
Boom.
you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Your
No, I
whole
know.
like
It can
Right.
ruin
career,
your self-esteem.
Yeah,
of
you're
somebody.
canceled.
your
Yeah.
your friends don't like
Yeah.
you, or like no
Yeah.
one perceives you
Yeah.
everyone perceives you a certain way.
Certain way, right.
And now you can see how people walk around with that
Exactly,
anxiety.
anxiety. And the other thing about social media is everything is taken out of context.
Mhm. So
So there's
true.
nothing in true context that you're actually seeing,
Exactly.
you know? And so there is, and I think the
Yeah.
powers that be want that distraction, right? They don't want things to be in context because they have there is a different meaning. Everything is not black and white. There are different meanings to
Yeah.
situations
Yes.
and reasons that things are done in situations that have nuance to them. It's not black and white. It's not just
So
because you
true.
said those words, right? Those
Yeah.
words taken out of context mean something totally different.
Exactly. Well, what's so interesting about that is that no one really cares enough to get the context.
No,
one
because
cares enough.
this,
It's too difficult to get
Right.
It's a
context.
lot
It's too
easier.
much
It's a lot
time.
easier just
Right.
to
It's
do
a
this and
lot
check out.
easier. Yeah.
I don't want to have a conversation. It's easier to do this.
Yeah.
And be in my own little bubble.
It's so much
world.
easier to hate that way too.
Oh,
it's difficult to hate up close.
absolutely.
When you have context for someone, it's
Right.
like, oh, I didn't realize you were going through that.
Right.
Now I have empathy.
Right.
Oh, now you're not
and
so
it,
different
and it
from
starts
me
with a
anymore.
conversation. You know, just caring. Just we're reading this book right now about hospitality, and something that stood out to me was the guy was talking about service is black and white, but hospitality is in full color.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Because service, you're just serving people, right?
Yeah.
But when you go to the extra step of hospitality, like, let me make that drink. Was the drink warm enough? And to caring and to talking to that individual, you know, what they really like in their drink. Because people will walk up and ask for a cup of coffee. They're like, oh, I just take black. Well, have you ever had steamed milk with it? Or have you ever tried, have you ever tried an espresso with a little dollop of foam or something? They're like, well, I've never had that. It was like, well, now's the time, now's the time to check it out. Try it, expand it a little bit. And all of a sudden there's a conversation and their mind opened up and they're like, whoa, steamed milk and espresso. Wow, that tastes really good.
Well, and that comes to the point of it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, right? So people will remember how you make them feel much more than they ever remember what you tell them, or how, you know what I mean? So it's basically, it's part of that experience. How do you make people feel?
And I think we need to do that as a whole, is doing that, get in a habit of doing that. And I think training or teaching or setting by example, doing that same thing. Because they will remember
how you made them feel.
Right. Well, imagine if you're talking about training your employees. Imagine if you had this great hospitality in front of your customers and then you didn't treat them well when you got back to the shop.
Right.
How would that look to them? They would be like, oh.
Hey. Right. Well, it wouldn't be authentic.
It wouldn't be authentic, right? And why would they want to learn that type of hospitality that's two-faced?
Right. If you treat your employees well, they will treat your customers well.
Yeah. And so it's really like honestly a lifestyle that you've developed. Right? Because it's not like you go home and you're mean to your wife.
Right. No, it runs through the whole.
It's a culture.
Yeah.
It runs through the whole course of our lives.
Culture.
Like, is it a cult? It's actually a culture.
Cult is short for culture.
Yeah.
That's what he says in the book. He's like, cult is short for culture, which it is. And again, if that rat race that is being perpetuated out in the world, you only need a little bit of quiet time to realize that you can step out of it. You can step out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And you can still be relevant and you can still be, accessible and you can still be very authentic, right? And I think that's probably what's been we're probably most proud of our success and staying in our lane. When we say we stay in our lane, there's a couple times that we'll get down on ourselves and like, why aren't we don't know how to make it bigger. We don't know how to make it, we don't know how to get more.
We should have done this.
Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do that. And then, I find just peace in the fact that we have been able to step out of the noise and say, no, this is what really works. And this is what our passion is and what we really want to keep doing. And we just keep plugging it away at that, right? And it doesn't matter at some point how big we are. Like John said, do you want to be a franchise? Do you want to be, I don't want to be McDonald's. That loses, I think, a lot of its, authenticity and sure, every place has to have systems and you want everybody to do things consistently. Right. But, I don't want a robot to serve me my coffee. I want.
It's very difficult to scale authenticity.
A friend of mine
exactly. He just said it.
A friend of mine sent me this thing the other day. He goes, you got competition. And it was that electronic AI arm that comes down and does the espresso for you, does a lot. It's just an arm.
How cool is that?
And I was like, oh my gosh.
No.
How about that experience?
I don't want that experience.
No.
It's
kind of cool for a second, but it doesn't do anything to promote.
I can see the need for it,
anything.
Well, and what you said about cult and culture is so interesting to me because in college, when we were on our little second floor group, people like joked around with us. They were like, "Yeah, it's just a cult," and we kind of we joked about it. It became an inside joke and an outside joke, really, because. When what you just said, the culture had become so strong that, and people have a negative connotation of cults because what they are just groups that have used human psychology for usually bad.
Their own benefit. And
Their own
yeah.
benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, what if we could use those same principles of human connection? I mean, why are these groups so loyal to each other? Why are they so willing to serve? How have they figured this out in a way that a group can't be healthy and still do that?
And be,
it just serve one another, love one another, but not be manipulative.
Right.
Not say that,
you can let your guard down.
Yeah. Right. It's like, and that's what I experienced. And that's why we've called it the second floor experience.
I love that.
Is because what is behind everything is what you've mentioned.
Right.
Is simply the experience I had of being with a great group of guys that I could trust with my authenticity, with my vulnerability.
Authenticity.
I can come on the dorm floor and I can just, no matter what happened throughout the day, I can be myself, be like, guys, this was tough.
It's like your closest nucleus. You can feel very comfortable.
Yes.
If you say something stupid, that's fine. They understand you. They get you. You bring in a couple new people and everybody has to be on. You got to be afraid. What am I going to say? What are they going to think?
Yeah.
And then you start comparing. And when you start comparing yourself, that's where you start spiraling.
So true. True. It's simple, but it's not easy.
I love that concept because I heard that a long time ago. It's simple. It's just not easy. And it's so true because there's a lot of things that are simple in our life that we just can't do. Like working out 30 minutes a day is really simple concept.
Simple concept.
It's just very hard to do.
Very difficult.
No, it's like, eating healthy. It's a really simple concept, very hard to do. And again, you're going against all of the, noise and the, advertising and things like that. And we were just talking about this the other day because we watch television, but we watch mostly sports on television, but we always talk about programming. It's called a program for a reason. Right.
And if you read any of these books like 1984, George Orwell, or you read Fahrenheit 451,
right.
You see, oh my God.
You can see the steps that were taken to get us where we are today.
In those books, it talks about
it's very specific
media room that the entire wall, all three walls are screens.
Yep.
But this is in like the 40s.
Yes.
Or the other one is a TV that can listen to you.
Yeah. Which we have now.
That's a little freaky that was written in the freaking 40s.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we have those things that are normal today.
Because it was a concept that actually was presented and worked, right?
Yeah.
It's history.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it again. Communism, Marxism, that kind of thing. Those tactics are being used, and and it's like boiling the frog, right?
Yeah.
The frog's in the hot tub, and it's not. He doesn't go into the boiling water. They just raise the temperature until it's too late, And so so that's where we are today. It's like, they've just slowly raised the temperature over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And so that we don't understand what's going on. And then all of a sudden, when we do, it's almost too late. I don't think it's too late for us yet, but it's close.
And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. I really believe that.
To that idea that, hey, wait a minute, we're the ones that are being, manipulated and used not for our own good.
No.
For somebody else's, manipulation in a bad way, in an evil way, not in a good way to promote healthy, happy culture, to kill, the
connection and the
connection, right? Absolutely.
That's what
so
the most powerful thing is.
What you guys are trying to do is extremely important for the continuation of the existence of life as we know it.
It takes a little scratch, we got to start scratching back.
Yeah,
we've got to do some small changes, and it takes one person, two people, group expanding on that same idea.
Yeah,
we need to do something, to expand the second floor.
Exactly. Well, I want to make sure that we can plug your stuff. You have your 30-year anniversary. You're coming out with some new merch. We're going to be posting these things, collaborating. Is it fair to say that the best way for people to help you guys out is to maybe like refer businesses?
So we're business to business, right? We're literally helping you show appreciation to your tenants, your employees, your clients. That's what we're doing, right? So we're like, that's important to understand that we're business to business. Like I said, I see a lot of people that see us as a retail something, right? And we're not. We're a service.
Yeah.
We're in the service
You
industry.
can get our coffee online.
You can buy the coffee
That's where
online.
because so many people go, God, this is really great coffee. These are blends that I came up with. There's 3 or 4 blends that I came up with way back when, and we do a couple of other varietals on our website, but all organic, all fair trade. But the trick is when people come up, they go, where can I get this? Well, you can actually, we don't have a coffee bar, but you can go online and order the
Perfect.
coffee.
So I'll make sure to have that linked up in the
Yeah.
show notes for you guys. But thank you so much for giving your time. I know you're mom and pop business owners,
Yeah.
technicians. Time is money, right? It's valuable.
Yep,
so
yep.
thank you for
No,
letting us
we
use
really
this space.
appreciate
It's
it.
really
This
cool.
was really super. We look forward to doing it again. We
Yeah.
can expand on
Yeah,
this.
I learned a
Love
lot too, just kind of listening, like telling the story. We really do. You can see the passion, when we do tell our story, and that's good. But telling the story again and hearing it back and hearing different perspectives always gives me a little bit more knowledge too about who we are and where we're
Yeah.
going and where we, what we
Perspective.
want. And so it was really educational for me too to sit here and kind of have this conversation.
Oh, and I know so many
I
people
really
are going to be able to
appreciate that.
learn from the story. I mean, there's so many gold nuggets in there. It's crazy. I wish I'd do my best to draw it out.
Yeah, and I think if we go back, look at this, we could actually dig a little deeper in some areas.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Oh,
awesome.
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh,
For sure. There was a lot
absolutely.
of things that I was like, oh man, I could say that.
I don't know how
better.
you found this. This is a great setup. This is awesome.
I don't know. Some great people
It just
let me
came-
hijack
it
their
just
entire
came out of
lives
the-
and their entire business just to let
I
me
know, I
put a
was thinking
studio.
about that this morning, like just how we were connected and then how quickly we were just like,
Yeah.
like we didn't
That's
know
kind of crazy.
We didn't really know you,
You
at
didn't
all.
know me
but we
at
knew-
all.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
just
we were
like, yeah,
okay.
here's the keys.
I walked in here. I was like, "Where'd the espresso sign come from?" I was like, "Is that a
That was
is this
cool.
a natural or what?"
I know, and we kind of added a couple of things. We were like,
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. It's
Hope they
like-
don't mind this,
Yeah.
That was really cool. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, it was great meeting Zach too.
Oh, he's awesome.
And yeah,
he's a
he
great guy.
yeah, you can see the passion in his eyes too.
Oh
Just
yeah.
very personable, very
Yeah.
So
easy to get to know.
He just a quick final note. He actually just figured out that his passion is really hospitality too.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
He's great at loving people.
Yeah.
He's a guy that can sit with someone and just be there, like talk with them and not be anywhere else.
Oh
See,
no, absolutely.
you can
He
tell,
was very
right?
yeah.
Me, I'm like
present. Very
I'm thinking
present.
of. It's so
No,
easy
you're-
for me to think about. Okay, what's like? Is the camera going? Like, what's next?
That's
what's going
me.
on?
That's
right.
me.
But like, I'm still listening, right? But it's like
But you
Zach
have
can
other
be there,
thoughts,
and
right.
he's 100% there.
No, he was. Yeah, you
I'm
could
like,
see
okay,
that.
I gotta go to sleep at night. Okay, I gotta get home. Tomorrow's coming. So
That is
squirrel.
John.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's John to a T.
So I think it's so funny that I feel like God connected both of us because, while we have great hearts, we're kind of maybe lacking in the skill department, whereas you guys are expert trainers in hospitality.
Right.
I don't think it's any coincidence.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's a
Right?
coincidence.
I mean,
Right.
come on, you can't
Yeah.
make that
No,
up.
and again, we're sort of like we're on the tail end of this for us,
Yeah.
in the fact that we are, we're probably going to always, we're never going to not be our authentic selves in anything we do.
course.
People come to our house to watch us cook and serve them. Like they literally won't invite us to dinner at their house because they don't think they can do what we do. And we're like, wait a minute, we were not asking you to do that, but that's just natural to us.
Yeah.
So we're never going to stop being that. But it is, it's hard to think that we're going to continue for 10 years running a business,
Right.
we're in the manner in which we do it now.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
And so we're
Mm-hmm.
looking for that, what's the next step for us? And then who's going to come up behind us and have that same authenticity, that same, love and passion for hospitality and serving others.
Yes.
So I feel like that's sort of, like
I
we
think
knew right away,
the next chapter is actually expanding training and showing people there is a way to
Yes.
do
That's
this.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
whether it's coffee or anything else.
Yes.
Right. So I
true.
think that was the connection for us with
Mhm.
you, is that was your vision, right?
Mhm.
Like your vision is, how do I authentically get people together and let them be their authentic selves in a world that is so, the perception is that you got to keep moving, you got to keep going, you got to, like you're never enough. You're never
Yeah.
enough in this world. So
Mm.
again, I feel like that's exactly what we heard when you it was like, who's going to do this? Who's going to carry this
Mhm.
this idea and this
Yeah.
foundation on for us? And I think that's why we sort of connected so quickly.
I agree.
It's like, oh wait, that's what you guys want to do.
Yeah. Our
It may be
values
in a
are like
right. It may be in
totally
a
aligned.
different setting. It may, it's going to be around. I mean, good coffee is not going to go out of style,
True. Yeah,
um,
true.
and the ability and what it provides, right?
Mhm.
The ability for, like John said, I get the authentic person in the morning. At night, I got the person who's drinking, stressed out, had a couple of, mind altering drinks in them that they're going to tell me all these big stories.
Yeah.
But in the morning, I'm getting, over the coffee,
Yes.
I'm getting or people who aren't doing the drinking, but in that coffee setting, you're going to get the authentic person,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And so I think that's, why this was all meant to be the way it is. And we truly believe in divine intervention, and
Absolutely.
the fact that God, we're never meeting somebody happen in a
It
happenstance
happened
way.
for a reason.
It's
Yeah.
always a reason behind
Yeah.
it. And we may not see what it is. Even in our lifetime, we may not understand the reason
True.
things
Yeah.
happen.
Maybe a while down the road, we're
Right.
like, that happened, or this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that too. It's like we may not but as a faith person,
Mhm.
like faith-filled person, I'm like, I'm content
Mhm.
and peaceful with the idea that I may not know
Mm.
why everything happened
Mm.
before I'm not in this world anymore. I
Yeah.
don't have to know.
Wow.
I can just trust that there is a reason for it, and
Mhm.
hopefully good came out of
Mm.
whatever the experience was.
That's so freeing. So powerful. Just be like,
It is very
"It's good."
powerful. I hope more people learn that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. Because Ryan always said to me, in this crazy world, right? Like I said, we're older, we're more foundational in our faith and in the way that we do things, right? Traditional in that way. Ryan said to me one day, he said, all my friends and their parents are just in this frantic, like crazy, everything's aggravating, everything's upsetting, everything's like fast. And he goes, I come home and he's like, you guys are never like that at home. You're like, God will provide, or that happened for a reason. Or he's like, how come you guys are always okay with everything that's happening? You're never like stressed out or frantic about, we lost that niche, or this didn't work out, or whatever. And that's what we told
just
him.
have
We're
faith
like,
that-
we have faith that God has us where he wants us. We have faith that God is having us meet the right people at the right time and doing the right thing. And we have so much faith in that we don't have cause to be upset about things. I'm not saying that we don't have normal, reactions
We freak out.
to certain
Of course,
things,
we're all human.
but
Yeah.
we don't live in that
Yes.
turmoil, because we have faith that God is going to provide,
Yeah,
right?
peace. That
And
surpasses
so it's funny
understanding.
that our 20-year-old would recognize that and say,
Right.
I come home and you guys are always okay with whatever happens. And then
Yeah.
I go out there and I see my friends and I see their families, and they're all in this frantic state. And he's judging which place do I want to be in, right? Where do I want to set myself?
Yeah.
Trying
Trying to figure that
Right.
out.
So that was what I was going to say earlier.
I'm glad it
I
came
was
up
like,
right at the end.
It
Came all the way back around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
You'll know where to find them. Their website's going to be in the link in the description. Please support them. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Second Full Experience. Peace
Awesome.
out.
Thanks.
thank you so much.
Awesome.
I want to talk to you. Not now, later. No, now.
My light's freaking out.
Awesome.
Overheating.
Hope that didn't mess up the recording.
No, the audio will be great. we're hoping
Yeah,
to get
we
some
don't
more
understand how this
equipment soon.
podcast thing works. We'll
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
I was so paranoid and anxiety ridden myself. I'm like,
I
okay,
know.
how's this gonna do?
told
I don't
him
know how's this
I
gonna
know.
do.
I
go,
really.
I'm telling you right now, he's nervous. I'm going to tell you why I know this. I go, he's doing everything else except coming to sit down here.
But that's what I needed to make sure everybody had coffee. I want to make sure everything was just right.
Now,
I want to make sure Tony was good. I wanted to make
But let
Yeah.
me tell you, when I was having Ryan,
Everything except making me talk in front of a camera, please.
when I was is this
That's perfect.
all right.
Yeah. That's
when I was
perfect.
having
Thank you.
Ryan, like literally in labor,
Yeah.
we had Ryan at Breckenridge Hospital where we had the kiosk operations, right? So I'm having a C-section planned, right?
Yeah.
I'm literally in the middle of it, and I'm like, where is John? Like, where's John? He's gonna miss this. And they go, oh, he's serving coffee to the nurses.
No way. So we had the kiosk at Breckenridge Hospital.